All right, we are rolling now. Counting us down. 3, 2. You're listening to Missing Out with Lex Michael and Tauri J. Let's start the show. Hello there, Misketeers, and welcome back to Missing Out. I am Tauri J.
I am Lex Michael.
And if this is your first time listening, what we do here is we introduce each other to different media, whether it be movies, music, television, spoken word, books, and experiences, things that have built us up as people, and we hope that in sharing it, it builds you up. We are the retrospective that is introspective.
Tauri, your podcast intro took me to the threshold.
Well, I'm glad. Time to open your eyes in the darkness and to get them power blocks where they need to go.
I will say, if Riddick had a podcast and was able to thread that needle the way you just did and intro that efficiently, he would still be king of the weird, scary armor people.
That's true. That was his one downfall. No podcast. As we have not so subtly alluded to, we are talking about Chronicles of Riddick, the whole trilogy. We're talking Pitch Black. We're talking Chronicles of Riddick 2004. We're talking Riddick 2013. We're not talking Riddick 4 Furia, because that doesn't exist yet. But we are going deep in, and this was brought to us by our good friend and yours, J.Q. Salazar. JQ, what up?
What's up? What's up, guys? It's been a while.
Yeah, how have you been?
It's been all right. I used to live in Denver last time I was on the show. Now I live in Florida. Whoop.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Not that cool.
What? Don't laugh at me. It is cool. People love Florida. I've never been. I don't know. But either way, you brought this in for us, so, pitch it. Why should people watch it?
Riddick, the trilogy. Why do I love it? Because it's awesome. And the best thing about that is it's in space. The main character, Riddick, is just a beast. You know, it's a totally fascinating, totally convicted character. He knows exactly who he is and what he wants to do and how he wants to go about it. Nobody else matters, except for the people that do matter. And there are people that matter in this series. So, that's really the whole thing about Riddick is he thinks he knows what he's doing, but then something pops up that he has to care about. And it just sucks when you got to care about something. So that's why I love Riddick.
That's what I say too. It sucks when you have to care about something. And nobody matters except for the people that do.
It's true. Yeah. You never know who matters until you meet them.
Yeah, it's tough, man.
Yeah, totally. Oh man, I really liked. I had only seen Pitch Black, and Chronicles of Riddick came out just before I went off to college, and so I never got to see it, and which meant that subsequently I never watched Riddick because continuity and all that stuff. And so I was excited to get back in on this because I specifically was a very big Riddick fan. I was like, oh yeah, Vin Diesel's dieseling it up. Oh boy, look at this anti-hero. Oh yeah. Speaking of anti-heroes, that's why this fits in our all of the Kool-Aid month, because this guy is inserting himself into situations and he's like, I can kill for you. But yeah. Lex, were you a big Riddick fan growing up? Have you seen the series? What's your deal?
So I had seen Pitch Black, I want to say, on cable years and years ago. And I saw Chronicles of Riddick shortly after it came out and found it incomprehensible. And so I never really went back. And I had not seen Riddick 2013 either. But I have known Jay for a long time. And Jay has been a big fan of these movies forever. And it's been, I'd say it was 2004 that Chronicles came out. So roughly 15, 16 years, you've been telling me I need to go back and revisit these movies. I know when the third one came out, you were very excited and had no one to share it with.
Yes.
And so finally, after a decade and a half plus, and years of Tauri and I having a platform on which we could finally dive in and hash the series out, I consented, and now here we are. And I will say, one, I had a better experience with Pitch Black than I ever have before. Two, while I get why I found Chronicles incomprehensible at the time, I don't really know what my problem with it was, because I ended up enjoying that one a whole lot as well. And I thought that they did a great job with the third one, as far as like, it really felt like, yes, they went back to basics, but they were able to sort of mesh some of the best parts of the first two movies together in a way that I thought was very impressive. But also, and we can talk more specifically about this when we get to the other side of the spoiler wall, but the way that this team, led by David Twohy, was able to, from the ground up, essentially build and execute an original sci-fi universe in a way that, yeah, like I think these were some of the last guys that really got to do this in this way. I thought was really impressive. So yes, I came away a fan, so much so that after I watched them, I did digital rentals for all of them. But after I watched them, I ordered the 3-pack Blu-rays so that I could listen to the commentaries and stuff. So yes, you have you've converted me. I am now a fan. I have joined you after all this time. I have joined you on Mount Riddick, on the desert planet where we hang out with our weird CG dog friends and we fight like lake scorpion monsters, whatever the fuck that thing is.
Right. It's weird that you choose that one and not the one where there's actually like a space religion. But
because we're alone. We're the last men on the planet, but we're Riddick fans. It's just us and the CG dogs. Yeah, it's us and the CG dogs and like a portable generator and a little TV where we listen to the Riddick commentaries.
Aww. That sounds fun.
No, I probably should have just said that I saw the original Pitch Black in theaters when I was like 11. You know, I think I just went with my dad. We didn't even know what it was. And I just remember thinking like, wow, that was better than, we thought it would be. But then it wasn't until I saw Chronicles of Riddick, and I didn't even realize until I think I went to see the movie in the theater that it was a sequel to Pitch Black, because, like I was a kid back then. I didn't, you don't think about it that much. And then I think that's what really got me, was like, wow, it's a sequel, but it's also like a completely different film, and it's way, for better or worse. But it was like I'd just never seen anything like that, where the sequel was like just blown out of proportion in such a way. And then I was like convinced that we were never going to get a third one until we did, and now maybe we'll get a fourth one, but I don't know.
I mean, I had heard. I guess not heard, but I read that the third one exists because Vin Diesel was like, hey guys, I love this character. I want to make another movie. And so he essentially bartered an appearance in Tokyo Drift for the rights to Riddick so he could make the sequel. And then he self-funded it for the most part.
Right.
Which is bonkers. He
even talks about in the making of stuff, he said that he mortgaged his house just to be able to do it, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah. I mean, and I get it. I think for him, the Riddick character, beyond being his breakthrough character, also is inhumanly badass. I mean, I guess he's not human. He's a Furian. But he is basically what the early 2000s badass archetype was. And yeah. I definitely feel like him being like, yeah, I feel connected. I don't know. Cause he's Sylvester Stallone as well. Yeah, I definitely see him feeling a connection to this character and wanting to explore where he goes. So I think it will be hard to talk about the franchise without going into spoilers. So I think this is a good time to drop down the spoiler wall. Listen to us slowly turning the handle, ticka 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 ticka. This is your chance that if you don't want to be spoiled for anything Pitch Black, Chronicles of Riddick related, for you to jump off, and you can come back. They are available on assorted platforms. Like, you can find them all on Amazon and Vudu, and I believe the YouTube rental store. But you could also be like Lex Michael and get the triple pack Blu-ray. Or you can just rent them or go on Cinemax Go, and it also has Riddick or Chronicles of Riddick and Riddick. So, like, yo, do it. Find it. It's there's no dearth of places to do so. While you're here, though, if you would like to and you're feeling so inclined, please go on to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating or review. We read 5-star reviews here on the show. But beyond that, we appreciate it because it helps us get to the top of the charts, helps other people find us, helps people join Lex and Jay's cult of Pitch Black lovedom. But most specifically, it helps other people find the show, which is more important than Pitch Black. I'm sorry. So please do so if you have a chance. And we'll be back right after this break. And we are back. And you know it's my favorite time, y'all. It's time to bust a recap. And Jay is going to recap all 3 movies for you right now. Boop. Go, Jay.
Okay. Pitch Black. The year is 2000. This is one of the last sci-fi films we're going to get of this kind of caliber, where we got like the low to mid-range, budgeted film. I think the budget was 40 mil. No. The first Pitch Black was 20 mil. All right. So $20 million sci-fi film, kind of just out there, not really expecting much. And it develops this great cult following because of the man named Riddick. Richard B. Riddick, if we're being specific. Okay. And the thing is that, this isn't, I don't think when this movie came out, it was like supposed to be a Riddick movie because it wasn't, that wasn't a thing yet. This is just a film about a random cast of characters who crash onto a weird alien planet that they don't know, and they got to survive. It's a crazy wilderness out there. There's some things coming. There's some things in the dark. And, there's this guy on board named Riddick, and he's murdered people. He's done some bad things, and he's on his way to be delivered to a slam, which is, code for prison in this world. And he, he's not a nice guy, and everybody's scared of him, and they're scared that he's going to kill them. But what they really need to be afraid of is what's out on the planet in the dark. And only Riddick knows about this because he's got that animal sense. They say that when you're in cryo sleep, that everything in your brain shuts down except for the primitive side. And only Riddick knows about this, okay? So anyway, they crash on this planet, and they're all running around trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And they find out that there's some kind of eclipse thing happening. That's right. The planet has 3 suns, which is just insane. 3 suns. It's never nighttime. But soon that these different suns and planets are somehow going to turn it into like some kind of design that makes an eclipse. I don't even get it. Like 3 suns. How do you have an eclipse with 3 suns? But whatever.
Space magic.
Yeah, right. Space magic. But the crazy thing is that the eclipse is going to last like 20 years or something. I forget the exact thing, but it's just an insane amount of time. And they realized that, there was a settlement of passengers, of people who landed on this planet. It's unclear what it was used for, but some kind of outpost. And everybody
they were geologists.
They were geologists. That's right. Everybody was about to leave, but then the eclipse happened and everybody was killed by the alien life on the planet. And then I guess like 20 years went by because the eclipse ended. And then now the eclipse is going to start again. I don't know. That part was confusing. But Riddick they finally strike up a deal with him because he's really adept. Like he can run around really fast and jump off of things. And, he's just like he's very primitive. He's very animal. And they need his help to help them fight the aliens on the planet or whatever. They just need to team up with him. And they're preparing to load up the only ship that they can to get off planet, but they got to carry these fuel cells, which are back at the other ship. So they end up making 6 or 7 trips back and forth between the original ship and the new one. And then finally the eclipse happens and, all hell breaks loose. There's just these crazy creatures that are like bird, pterodactyl, raptor things, like rhinoceros kind of stuff going on there too. I'm not even sure, but they gotta stay alive, and it essentially turns into a horror film, like a slasher, where people are getting picked off one by one. And that's the gist of it. That's Pitch Black. I think it was a somewhat lucrative success. I don't think it made more than $100 million, but enough to warrant a sequel in the sense that this was right when Vin Diesel was at his jumping off point. He did Fast and the Furious the next year. And then Triple X, I think the year after that, and he was, just a megastar. And I think Universal was just like, give him whatever he wants. And he wanted to do more Riddick. And him and the original director of Pitch Black, David Twohy, they teamed up and decided that Riddick was going to be suddenly basically like a superhero, and everything was just going to get way more out of proportion. Whereas Pitch Black was like one small adventure on one planet. Now we're doing like a galaxy spanning kind of thing where we're planet hopping and just getting to know everybody who lives in this crazy world. And on top of that, there's something coming. There's something coming from deep space, and everyone's scared. What is it? It's the Necromongers. They're an army of. Well, actually, they're not dead, right? Their leader is undead or half dead, something like that. And they're what they do is they show up, wipe out the entire planet, and anybody who's left, they just convert them to their religion by injecting like some kind of virus into their neck. I'm not sure, but these guys are bad news, and Riddick just happens to be like around when they show up, and they kill one of his friends, who's Keith David from Pitch Black. I guess that's technically a spoiler for Pitch Black that Keith David lives, but he dies at the beginning of this movie, so it's not really a spoiler for that because it's so early into the movie. But anyway, Riddick's not happy that they killed his friend. So he wants revenge, but he only wants revenge on the guy who killed his friend, none of the other guys. And there's like a whole army of these guys. So he shows up, beats that guy's ass, and the leader of the Necromonger is like, yo, you're a beast, come join us. And Riddick's like, no way. And they're like, well, maybe if you asked the breeder, he would willingly join. And, they bring him on board and give him a tour of their ship. And he's still like, I'm not cool with this. And at that point, they realize that Riddick is a Furian. A Furian, which is not a human, I guess, or maybe it's an evolved human. We don't really know. But there's a race of people called Furians from the planet Furia. And Furia was wiped out by none other than the leader of the Necromongers way back in the day, because he heard a prophecy that, he needed to kill all the Furians because eventually a Furian would come and kill him and replace him. And he thought he did that, but somehow Riddick was the only one who survived, of course. And basically all hell breaks loose from there. The fate of the universe is in Riddick's hands. And that was it. 2004, Chronicles of Riddick came out, didn't do as hot as they wanted to compared to the mega budget it had, and it was all said and done. That was it. There was fans in the crevices of the world that were crying out for another Riddick movie, and then 9 long years went by until we got the next one, and that one was simply called Riddick. Lame, right? Bad title. It doesn't even make sense why the last one was Chronicles of Riddick and this one's just Riddick. Isn't this still another Chronicle? Whatever. But by the way, I do remember that in the original screenplay was titled The Chronicles of Riddick, Dead Man Stalking, which is actually an awesome title for this movie. It fits very well. But I get why they didn't want to market it that way because, it's just like nobody, there's those people who hated Chronicles of Riddick because let's be honest, it wasn't the best movie, especially of the bunch. So they probably didn't want to associate with the Chronicles thing anymore. Regardless, this Riddick was like, what did they say? Back to basics. They dump him on another alien planet and he's got to survive. And this time, he switches it up a little where like the first, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes of the movie, he's completely by himself with nobody to talk to except the audience in a narration. But then, he hits a button on some machine in some building that calls all the other people to show up, bounty hunters. And his plan is to steal their ship, but their plan is to kill him. And once again, all hell breaks loose. And all right, that's what I got.
Nice. Right. So those are all the movies, right? I feel like both of you guys have given Chronicles of Riddick some guff. And I personally, I enjoyed Chronicles of Riddick for the fact that they took this standout character of a thing and we're like, nah, like we're gonna do some world building. We're gonna make him a chosen one. We're gonna show you guys what's happening in all the other universes. Bro, you thought Alien had some stuff going on? Riddick's got all that shit and more. Oh, you want a Prison Break heist movie? Fucking you got that shit too. Yo, Chronicles of Riddick. Pew 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 pew. Puff of smoke. So yeah, like I feel like I was describing the trajectory of the movies and how like the first one was basically like I don't want to say an Aliens clone, but like that's the creature feature type of movie that it was, with like some really cool CG, some dope creature design. And then they're like, yo, we're going to do a space epic. And you're like, dope. And then the last one, they go back to basics. So it's like this bell curve in terms of action and budget, and they're like, all right, cool. It's just going to be a man and his dog, a literal lone wolf and pup. And then we're going to have him like hanging out with some mercs. We're going to do some references to the first one too. The second one doesn't exist.
Did you watch the theatrical or the director's cut of any of them, actually?
I watched the theatrical for all of them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we need to do a real quick another segment, Tauri, that you love called What's the Difference? And Jay needs to real quick walk us through what the differences between the theatrical and director's cuts are, because I watched the director's cuts and I know, at least in the case of the third one, like the Carl Urban character comes back, but only in the director's cut, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's a much stronger connective tissue between Chronicles and the third movie in the director's cut, right? Like Jay, you were telling me that there is some Necromonger stuff in there regardless, but no Carl Urban.
From what I remember from seeing it in the theaters, I don't think there was any Carl Urban. There is still like the intro chunk where he's recapping how he ended up on the planet, but then and I think that's it. And maybe he references it here and there in the voiceover, but at the very end, it doesn't go back to it like it does in the director's cut.
Okay, so in the theatrical, you do get an appearance from Carl Urban where he's just standing around and he's like,
That's right. He shows up, but he doesn't say anything, I believe, right?
Right. So in the director's cut, Riddick goes back to them, or what? What happens?
Yeah, well, you know what? Real quick, let me jump back to Pitch Black. I think the director's cut of that is like maybe 10 minutes longer, maybe a little less. And I don't remember what was added and dropped, but it was, probably just like connective tissue for scenes or extended stuff. And then in Chronicles of Riddick, there's actually a decent amount that's cut out. I want to say the director's cut is like 15 to 20 minutes longer. And it's all small things, like I was saying, like connective stuff or like elongated scenes. Yeah. But it develops the world more and has a lot more going on with it. But then, and then Riddick it seems to be the most significant one where they basically just cut out, all the, because there's no talk about like transcendence or anything. Was there in the theatrical?
No.
You remember? No. Okay. Yeah. There's like this big like window with a portal into space outside, like a weird green wormhole looking portal outside of the Necromonger ship. And
Okay.
Riddick was like staring at it, and Carl Urban shows up and he's like, basically like, give me the Necromonger crown and then I'll let you do whatever you want. You can go back to Furia and whatever. And because all I want is transcendence. That's what Carl Urban wants. And then obviously Riddick gets betrayed, but then he goes back to that ship after he pieces out at the end of the movie on the little ship that he gets. And he finds the dude who left him for dead, the guy who blew up the cliff he was on.
Yeah.
He finds that guy, kills him, and then one of the women who are on board, he's asking them like, "Where's Carl Urban? Where's Vaco?" And he's like, "Is he alive or is he dead?" And the woman's like, "Both," and kind of alludes to that he is transcended, and that he's now like, I'm guessing like he went into the green portal thing that's outside of the ship window, and Riddick just stares off and he's like, "Transcendence," and that was it.
And so it's essentially a cliffhanger ending in the director's cut, which very much it feels like a lot of what they took out is stuff that would lead you directly into the hypothetical fourth movie that they may or may not ever be able to make.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I will say that from the theatrical, having watched the theatrical version, I don't feel like I'm missing out on that.
I would say you are missing out if you care about Chronicles of Riddick and you care about the overall mythology. But if you're just looking at Riddick as a film that stands alone, then no, you don't really need it.
And without that material, like you shave a little bit off the beginning and you shave that ending off, you essentially have something that functions more or less as a standalone reboot of the original. Like it does feel a little bit like, I'm not going to say a Pitch Black clone, but it definitely felt like, all right, so we tried this other really super ambitious thing that cost a lot of money, did not make that money back, so let's figure out how we do this for less money, and B, how we sort of get people that maybe we lost with the second installment back on board with the general vibe of this one.
I guess so. I think my read of Riddick, especially from Chronicles, where he keeps being like, "I just want to be left alone," was that like one, being the leader of that group never behooved him, and he just wanted to go home. So like at the end, he's like, "I'm going to Furia," and I was like, all right, that seems like his logical next step. And I get that he's all about petty revenge, like, and that's how he got involved with the Necromongers in the first place. Is he's like, "You kill my friend, I kill you," and so him going back to the Necromongers to kill that one guy makes sense. But at the same time, yes,
dude, you just reminded me that the director's cut of Chronicles of Riddick has an extra subplot about him being a Furian. I don't know. I don't think you saw that, right? Where with like the handprint on his chest and the girl who talks to him in his dreams or whatever.
Oh no, not at all.
Okay, yeah. So real quick, in the very beginning of Chronicles of Riddick, when he steals Toombs' ship and like sets course for Helion Prime and kind of like goes into cryosleep or whatever, he has like a vision where this woman with like blonde dreadlocks, I think, or some kind of weird hairdo, she talks to him and tells him that like she's like, "You're a Furian." It's pretty silly, to be honest. But then he sees that like a couple times again and throughout the movie, and then in the scene where he is where Carl Urban leaves him for dead, and the other Necromonger guy like reveals that he's a Furian too. You saw that, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. In that scene, the woman like comes to him in his like mind or whatever, and she's the one who puts the blue handprint on his chest that he uses as like some kind of Kamehameha explosion to knock everybody back. I don't remember how they did it in the theatrical because I guess they didn't show that.
Yeah, that never happens.
Dang. Okay. Weird. Yeah, that's a whole thing, and so like it reinforces the fact that he should give a shit about Furia and his past and all that. And I think that kind of plants that seed for him to be more like, oh, I want to go home now. Because I guess in the theatrical that's not there, so it doesn't really land as hard.
Yeah, in the theatrical, he's just like, oh, cool. This being a Furian means I can beat this guy up, eh? And so like he goes back to go, like his main driver in Chronicles of Riddick is the Jack, who is now Kiri, something like that. Kira. And so he just wants to go get her back because they kidnapped her. And then that leads the king or the vice marshal or the grand marshal to be like, hey, you're a Furian and I would need all the Furians dead, so let's make a fight. And then he like starts to beat him up, and then Karl Urban's like, yo, I want to get in a fight too. It's time to take this guy down. That's how he talks. And so while Karl Urban is about to harm him, Vin Diesel gets a face stab in, and he's like, I guess I'm king now.
Right.
Yeah. So like it's all about his relationship with Jack, which I liked, and I had read that it was rumored before Riddick came out that it was going to be about him going into their like afterlife to go get Jack, and I think that would have been a really cool but also very expensive movie.
Yeah. I think that, like I was talking to Alex about this. If they do a fourth movie, the problem is that they're going to need another $100 million budget if they're going to pull off the story the way that they've been alluding to. Like he would have to go back to the Underverse to get her, and then based on the way the director's cut of Riddick ends, it would be assumed that Baco would be the villain, or he's already transcended and he's some kind of who knows what. But there's the amount of effects money you would need, and then if you can't do it without bringing back, you'd have to bring back the same girl who played Jack, I would say, or Kira, Alexa Davalos, because you don't want to recast again, especially if it's been 15 plus years.
Yeah, though, I mean, you could effectively be like, oh man, the Underverse changes you, and then have everyone in like basically look like monsters or look like other creatures. That way you could recast her. You could even recast Karl Urban as just like a big CGI monster, and then have it. You could also effectively have the Underverse be a representation of places that you've been. So you just reshoot in places that you've already shot, and you're like, oh man, it's all like part of his. Yeah. It's part of his brainscape.
Green screen.
Yeah. I mean, the same desert that they shot Pitch Black in, which is just in Australia, or like the same desert they used for the second or the third one, Riddick, or like just a not desert, maybe like a tree planet. You know how there are planets that are just one thing. You've watched Star Wars.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So
what I will say, I think, is that a fourth one is like too. I don't know, the thing about Riddick is like there's no alien creatures in these movies. There's creatures, but there's no like sentient alien life forms, and there's no humanoid aliens, know. And I think that really helps it, be its own thing, because as soon as you start populating it with other aliens that talk and stuff, then it just becomes you can't help but compare it to stuff like Star Wars, and that's why they got to stick to that. It's still based on human drama. I mean, look at Chronicles of Riddick. You have so many amazing characters, even if they're only in a scene or two. I mean, one of my favorites is Toombs, who's like a version of somebody's like alcoholic dad who, divorced the mom and ran off or whatever to live his own bounty hunter life. And like, you kind of know him, he's familiar, but like, you don't know him that well. And like, he's just so captivating to watch, and the way him and Riddick play back and forth, and then there's obviously Keith David, who's just like an amazing addition with like some legit pedigree to his name.
Yeah.
And the only one who you could say that, is more than just human would be the Lord Marshal, who's basically like a caricature of an evil villain in most senses. And he's got like his purple goo power or whatever.
You also, though, you do have the elemental lady, the Judi Dench wind.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if we were to actually go into a fourth, they should probably do and like maintain it being as you were saying, like the like human drama. Then like they could do what God of War did, where God of War Kratos had his trilogy where he's like, oh man, I'm killing all the gods. And then now we get to revisit him as an older war weary person. And like, I think that would be a nice step for Riddick, where like he's already shown that he likes kids. He has a soft spot for people. So like, how about he like run into the like new Riddick and he's like having to deal with that. Like give him some new problems and take away some of his like extraordinariness. Or maybe he's like started a colony on Furia and he's making more Furians. So he's just shipping women in to do sex with, so they're all Furians.
Jesus, okay.
Wait, that's your pitch for the wait, that's your pitch for Riddick 4 is a Furian sex farm?
Not a farm. Like they're there, like they're there, like consensually, and they are like, yeah, I want to like help replenish this population, and with the way that Riddick is always written, which is grossly, they'll be like, yeah, oh, I would love to repopulate with this guy's genes. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Balls in my mouth.
He does get gradually like rapier as the trilogy progresses. I think honestly it's that he was king for just a little too long. And I think he internalized maybe some of the wrong lessons from having all of that power. Because yes, he's very rapey in the third one.
Yes.
I was just going to say, in the third one, there's that shot of him early in the movie where he's in bed with like 4 women. And I swear that shot was directly ripped from the first God of War. I don't know if you guys remember that or noticed that. Or anything.
I remember. Okay. Riddick is basically Kratos.
Yeah, in a lot of senses.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, anti-hero archetypes. Just a little less like blatant murdery. Like if Kratos is chaotic evil or chaotic neutral, then I would say like Riddick is more lawful neutral or lawful evil. One of those two.
Sure.
Yeah, you guys know about alignment charts, right?
Yeah. I know of them. I've never understood those charts. I mean, I know what the things are, but I never know how like you make those distinctions.
Have you
It's just arbitrary? Is there math involved? Is that why I don't understand it?
Have you looked into what they mean?
Yes, I don't necessarily like where's the line between one of the, like, where is the line between, let's say, lawful evil and chaotic evil? Like, is there a hard line, or is it just, I don't know, you got to make your best judgment?
So, the lawful to chaotic is how you go about doing things, and good to evil is your general sense of morality. And so the combination of those two things determines where you fall in the alignment. So if you are lawful good, you have a code and you use that code to do good. Whereas if you are lawful evil, you are evil and you have a code and use that code whilst doing evil. Whereas like chaotic good is you are good, but like you may go about it doing the wrong thing. You may go about doing it the wrong way sometimes. So like Robin Hood is chaotic good in that, like, well, he's more, I guess, neutral good. He jumps between chaotic and neutral depending on which version and if that version kills.
Russell Crowe.
Yes. So because he's doing a good, like he's robbing the rich and giving to the poor, but he's also, it requires him to rob people and sometimes murder. Whereas like, so chaotic is just how you go about doing things.
Okay. It does sound like there's a lot of math involved.
Sure. Yes, they're all word problems. It's like a train leaves at 3:00 from Chicago, and another one leaves at 5:00 from Boston, going 25 miles an hour. When do they meet? It doesn't matter because everyone's dead.
And then Riddick's like, you can have one of these power cells, and one train is for you, and one train is for me.
Yeah. So something I really like about this series is the creature design, especially in the first one with the like hammerhead monsters. I think they're called bioraptors, but they're also known as Chimera of the Night.
Okay.
I really like the design of these characters. These like they like see via sound or sonar, but they have this like blind spot. They're bipedal, but they also have wings. So I guess they're like bat bird things.
It's a little bit like somebody mashed the xenomorph from Alien with like a shark and a bat.
Yeah.
And a rhino.
Rhino.
But also like the like scorpion lizards from the third one. I mean, they feel like the same concept but different. But I like that the way that they characterize them is that they use their tails as a distraction, and they're like, "Ooh, my tail's a snake! Oh boy, watch out!" And then they're like, "Just kidding, I'm gonna bite your leg."
Yeah, dude. How about the dog?
The hyena?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just like just like a dog.
Aw.
I mean,
wow, cold.
I guess like that's just like it. It wasn't weird enough for me to be like, "You're not just a dog," but it was just
right.
It was just like like the buzzards were like lizard buzzards, whereas this guy like it wasn't like a lizard dog or like a pancake hyena. It was just like, I'm a dog.
I think they definitely did that to keep us, to make sure we emote and care about this dog.
Yeah.
You feel as bad as possible.
Yeah, because I was going to say, when they kill it, there's the shot of it dying. It lingers for way too long. It's like they really want you to give a shit.
Right. I do like that it had like one brown eye, one blue eye, because it was like, ooh, Riddick has special eyes and so does this. Wow, they're so the same.
Dang, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Also, I guess maybe this is no, maybe I'll ask. So I thought in Chronicles of Riddick, speaking of eyes, that they were trying to imply that the shine that he has that lets him see in the dark is a Furion thing, because when you meet Jack the first time or I guess for the second time in Chronicles of Riddick, she implies that like she couldn't find anyone to give her the shine on her eyes. And this was after they were like, you're Furion, Riddick. So I thought that that's where they were going, but like it never comes back. Is that...
Go ahead. I have a couple things to say about that. One, I think that would actually be the best explanation if it was because he was Furion. So if you take it like along the chronology of how the series came out, so when it was just Pitch Black, and he tells the story of how he traded 20 menthol cools to some doctor in a slam somewhere.
Yeah,
I think that was the legit thing, because there was no, they didn't make a sequel yet. And then when they made the sequel, they also made the video game Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, that came out, I believe, like right around the same time the movie did. And in the game, you play it's actually the story of John's bringing Riddick to the Butcher Bay prison, which happened before, Riddick escaped, and then Johns caught him again, and that's where he was when Pitch Black started.
Yeah.
And in the game, you go like it's basically like a giant, like the whole game you're trying to escape the prison because it's such a giant prison with like convoluted maps and everything. And you find this like witch doctor guy in the basement somewhere, and you give him 20 menthol cools. But what he does is he slices your arm open, and like some glowing stuff gets mixed into your blood, and then Riddick can just suddenly see at night. So I don't know if that's supposed to be canon or not, but from everything the game tells me, the game is considered canon.
Right.
And then in Chronicles of Riddick, like you're saying, she says that she couldn't find the doctor, or whatever. So it does like make the whole thing even more, bring more questions into it as to like what is the real deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Which is interesting because around that point in the movie, I just assumed that it was because he was Furion, and the story about the prison and the cools and the guy who gave him the eyes was just bullshit.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yeah, I don't know. If the game wasn't around, that would make sense.
Right. I mean, especially as you learn more about why he was in prison in the first place, which was like from what I understand of the backstory, he like spoke out against his military, and they were like, oh, well, we're going to erase all plans from the records, and we're going to put you in prison. Ooh, boy, you're a patsy. And then I guess in the midst of that ordeal, he had to like harden himself and become a killer. But like in that context, you could imagine that everything he says is bullshit, and he's just like, he's good at what he does because he's a Marine and stuff, and he like had to kill to kill, but like everything else is just like, what's real about Riddick? Not his eye shit. He was born like that and he doesn't know why. So he gives everyone a fake story in which he's like, "Ooh boy, I did it in the prison because I'm scary."
That's his that's his Joker pick your own origin story thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He like corners you. He's like, "You want to know how I got these eyes?"
Mm-hmm.
And like you piss yourself, and he takes that as a yes.
Yes.
A couple things I wanted to say about Pitch Black. Great characters. Radha Mitchell, the lead, I think she's, like just very solid, watchable lead role. And Cole Hauser as Johns, like probably in my top 3 favorite characters of the series. I love the whole dynamic of like that Riddick is his prisoner, but they're like duking it out basically all the way up until the way that Johns goes, I thought was great, and how like Johns is trying to convince Riddick to help him kill the rest of the crew so they can just take off together. And there's that moment where you realize that Riddick has been like leading him off path so that they could be away from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that like they have like there was like a spaghetti Western stare down where like the shots are closing in on their eyes and going back and forth, cutting back and forth really quickly. You see the glare, the animal glare in Riddick's eyes.
Yeah.
Hot.
Also, and I think Jay told you about this when I discovered it, but I was looking up some information about the cast of Pitch Black, and I discovered that Cole Hauser, who is, if you're listening and you don't know the name Cole Hauser, you'd probably recognize him. He's got a big filmography. He was the villain in Fast and the Furious 2, Too Fast, Too Furious, the one that Vin Diesel's not in.
Yes.
But
you got a great role in Higher Learning. I don't know if you guys have seen that, the John Singleton movie, which also was directed Too Fast, Too Furious.
But I discovered that his great grandfather was Harry Warner of the Warner Brothers. So he's actually comes from quite a pedigreed Hollywood family and whatnot. But I do want to, since you brought up a couple of the actors in Pitch Black, I did want to talk a little bit about the way these movies are cast across the board, and maybe I'll talk about the middle movie last because there's a couple other things I want to touch on, specifically how much it reminded me of the Thor movies, which is something that we talked about, Jay, very briefly, and I said that we would get into a little bit more here. But do want to shout out also, obviously Keith David is great, and I didn't realize there was so much actual like hard continuity between these movies until watching it this time. Like I wasn't prepared for Keith David to return in the second movie, which I thought was super cool. He is an actor that if you listen to this show, you know that we're big fans of. But the cast of the third movie, I had no idea who was in this thing except for Vin Diesel, and I had a vague recollection of Katie Sackhoff also being in it, and of course, like she Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica, a whole bunch of other credits. But every other face in this movie, I think, or at least almost every other face, is a face that I'm well acquainted with from a number of other projects. My biggest complaint, actually, to that about the third movie is that they did not give Bokeem Woodbine anywhere near enough to do before they had a monster eat him. That was my biggest. That was the biggest bummer of the third movie. But even honestly, even bigger than the dog being killed, I think, was that they didn't give Bokeem Woodbine more to do before they had a monster eat him. Because that dude is an awesome actor. If you have not watched Fargo, I highly recommend it. He's one of the leads in season 2. And that's, I think, like the first place I really keyed into him. And then, of course, you've got Matt Nabel, who's sort of the primary antagonist, or like big finger quotes antagonist for most of the movie. Two things about Matt Nabel in Riddick. One is Matt Nabel is tied to sort of this podcast's secret origin, in as much as he played Ra's al Ghul in the third season of Arrow, and that is when I joined the Arrow after show at AfterBuzz TV and met Tauri J. So that is he's a figure of significance around here. But the other thing that I want to point out is his presence in the movie reminded me very much, actually, of Simon Pegg's presence in The Boys, where he's introduced in a smallish part as the father of the main character, and he shows up, and you say to yourself, "Wow, super excited to see Simon Pegg, great actor." This dude is not old enough to be the father of this character. It's just not, it's not conceivable that this man, unless he is not a human being and in fact is some sort of ancient deity who does not age, it does not track conceivably that this man could be the parent of this man who does not look considerably younger.
Oh, wait, hold on. How old was Cole Hauser in Pitch Black? Like mid to late 20s? Maybe early 30s?
I mean, the thing is, like, Cole Hauser is one of those guys who's always read 35 to me. Like, no matter what, like 35 to 38. You know what I mean? Like, he's always read mid to late 30s. And so, hey, like, I'll answer that. You vamp for a minute. I will answer this question. So he was born in 75. So he was only
25?
Right?
Yeah, it's 75.
This is a lot of math. I was not anticipating math. Yeah,
so Cole Hauser was 25 in Pitch Black.
Which is wild, because the dude looks, and not to say he looks bad, like he's a good-looking guy, but he looks at least 10 years older than that.
Yeah, I would say like at least 30. But then, so Matt Nabel was how old when they did Riddick? Like 45?
Then if that's the case, then it is conceivable, number-wise, that they could be father and son, but Matt Nabel does not look old enough.
Well, no, it still doesn't work, because there's like a 10-year gap after Pitch Black. You know what I mean? So, like, if Matt Nabel's 45 in Riddick, he would have been 35 when Pitch Black happened, which means he had Cole Hauser when he was 10.
All right, guys. You guys are missing the big thing, which is this is space. So, there's time dilation, right? And also, cryogenic freezing. So he could have been on a really long cryogenic space trip. Yep, he was on a big cryogenic space trip. And then, you
know what? Actually, that would answer that question. Like, he's been in cryo sleep for a decade, and he wakes up and he's like, "Oh, where's my son, Cole Hauser?" And one of his buddies is like, "Yeah, about that."
Yeah. Yo, another thing I want to say about Pitch Black is I love how they really hype up Riddick as a character before we even really get to him having any dialogue. Like, there's so much of him being talked about by everyone else that, like, oh, he's this killer and he's blah, blah, blah. And Cole Hauser's like trying to keep a leash on him. And then, like, we see him, what is it? Like, he does that insane flex move where he dislocates his arms to get out of the restraints or whatever. And it's just like, oh my God, this guy's an animal. And then he ends up being like kind of nice. I love that flip on expectation.
I just looked it up, and the Cole Hauser and Matthew Nabel are only 3 years apart.
Yes, I just found this same piece of information. Matt Nabel is 3 years older than Cole Hauser. So Big John's had a baby at age 3.
Yeah.
The dude fucks.
Hell yeah, bro. Straight out the womb. But anyway, I really like the characterization of Riddick in that you expect him, based on how everyone talks about him and how he talks about himself, to just be this like ruthless, mindless killer. But he actually like has a code, and he actually cares about people, and he only kills when he has to or for petty revenge reasons. Like he only killed Little John because he was going to kill everyone else. And he was super compliant.
And technically he didn't kill him.
Right. He only left Little John's for dead because Little John was going to kill everyone else, which, is a bad thing. It's a bad guy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else is the terminology in this world is great. Like all the stuff they say, like, go into a slam, or, I didn't ghost him. I didn't ghost your son, Johns. Like I just love when they talk like that. He got a shine job in prison. It's a shine job. Like I want a shine job, like that's awesome. There's so many cool little, and the thing is that it's not just like, oh, space futuristic. It's all like run down, like, mercenaries, and their ships are all like clankety and rough, and it almost feels like an offshoot of like the Firefly world in some sense, how like everything's just broken down and everybody's just trying to get by, and it's just like ruthless.
It feels a little bit like, I think when I was watching the second movie, I said, Jay, to you that it felt a lot like I was watching like the Thor movies mashed with Alien 3 specifically.
Yeah, explain that.
I will. First, though, I want to shout out, before I abandon the third movie, want to shout out, Dave Bautista, the year before Guardians of the Galaxy. And like something that I find fascinating about Dave Bautista is that he actually takes acting as you'd hope he would, takes it very seriously as a craft. And he's very committed to sort of pushing himself as an artist and collaborator in that way. And the dude doesn't, of course, have anywhere near as much to do as, Bounty Hunter number 3, as he does as Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. But I already think it's clear, like, obviously the dude has a huge amount of presence, but he's getting a lot out of every individual moment in that movie. And I think it's really cool to see, like, this had to be one of his first real parts. And all of that stuff, like that technique that he continues to work on, is already in place. And I think that's cool. It's fun to see. Also, of course, fucking Jordy, is it Jordy Mola? Is that how you pronounce his name?
I guess. I don't know.
I was very excited to see him. I think the only other thing I really know him from is Bad Boys 2, where he's the villain, Johnny Tapia, but very excited to see him. He plays like really like borderline sniveling, but also super dangerous shitheads really, really well.
Yeah, he stole like almost every scene he was in Riddick, I think.
And so I want to talk about the second movie a little bit. And part of that too, like we haven't talked too much outside of Carl Urban about the cast of the second one. And they have some really high caliber, like classically trained actors. Like you've got your Judi Dench in there. You've got Colm Feore as the Lord Marshal. You've got Tandy Newton as like, she's very much doing like a Lady Macbeth type thing. And everybody's great in it. But okay, so to address your question, why does it remind me so much of the Thor movies? And it has a lot to do with the surface level details and how a lot of the surface level details relate to each other, and even extending as far as certain relationship templates that I think cross from one to the other. Important to note that Chronicles of Riddick was 2004, so there would not be any Thor movies for another 7 years. So they cannot be accused of cribbing from Marvel, but there's a lot of stuff that feels like a direct one-to-one. Some of the production design, a little bit. some of the way the production design is shot a little bit as well. Now, obviously, Marvel is now it's like a Disney thing, and they have all the money in the world and stuff. So the production design in Chronicles of Riddick, a lot of it feels a little bit scaled down by comparison. But the way they light some of the production design and shoot some of the production design reminds me quite a bit of the look of especially the first couple of Thor movies. A lot of the armor designs for the Necromonger soldiers reminds me very, very much of a combination of Asgardian armor and like a fucking, I don't know, like a Sauron Lord of the Rings type thing. The relationship between, and this is very much not a one-to-one, but the relationship between Riddick, who's sort of like the big, beefy, meatheady man who would be king, whether or not he really wants it, and the sort of sniveling, dark-haired schemer played by Karl Urban sort of reminds me a little bit of a Thor Loki thing. You've got your sort of what is it, like your classically trained Shakespearean actor rattling off really, really goofy exposition. So like I get a huge kick out of like in a Thor movie at the beginning when Anthony Hopkins is like, before the dawn of light, there were elves, and the elves were dark. Right. And shit like that. So like you get a whole, but like every time Judi Dench says Necromonger in this movie, I get a huge fucking kick out of it. So a lot of those surface level elements, but then things that are even more of a specific one-to-one. I had to like stop watching the movie for a second, Jay, and message you when they're in the prison and Riddick is attached to that rope. And they do the shot that Marvel and Taika Waititi would later do in Thor Ragnarok, where he's, basically caught up in that rope and dropping towards the camera. And it is almost exactly the same shot to a degree that is bothering me now, if I'm being honest. But a lot of surface level things that feel either reminiscent of what Marvel would later throw at us in the Thor movies, or feels like someone over at Marvel was a big fan and they went, well, this movie didn't make a ton of money. Our movies are going to make a ton of money. What can we steal? So it's a lot of stuff like that.
All right.
What about Alien 3?
Oh, Alien 3 for me had more to do it was a couple of things. One, if I had to compare it to an Alien movie, I do think aesthetically it has the most in common with 3, and it's not just like, yes, there's a prison with a lot of like molten business going on around them, but also it feels a little bit shaggy to me, I guess is maybe the best way I can think to articulate it, in a way that the first two Aliens don't, but the third one does. Although, of course, in the case of the third one, it's because they took the movie away from the director and fucked it up. But it does have a certain like an endearingly shaggy feel to it. So I could have picked, it also, reminds me of Alien Resurrection in a few places also. I could have picked probably any of them, but I picked 3 because it's got that sort of in-between shaggy feeling that I feel like I got from Riddick more than the other Alien movies do. So that's why I picked 3. 3 was more of an arbitrary choice. Well,
I think I had read that some of the ideas for Chronicles of Riddick were from a pitch that David Twohy had written down.
Right. David Twohy did the initial draft of Alien 3.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
It might be an unused draft though, but I don't know.
Right. So we are running out of time. Do you guys have any last thoughts before we wrap out?
Yes. Just real quick, some of my favorite Riddick one-liners. Did not know who he was fucking with at the end of Pitch Black. That's a great line. He says it to the alien he just killed. Mm-hmm. And I love the entire chase sequence, or not, I guess it is a chase, of when they're on the surface of the planet and they're trying to get to the other side and they're running through the mountains and stuff. And everything Riddick yells is amazing because he's just like, get that ass moving! And he says shit like, what is it? My favorite line, I think, in the entire series is, if you can't keep up, don't step up, you'll just die. Such a great line. I want to say that to everyone I've ever met. Yeah, just anytime there's a Riddick one-liner, it's always like a little better than, the where the bar is, the mediocre bar. He's just got enough. Sometimes they're great, but sometimes they're just enough.
Right. I'd like to imagine they're all improvised. He's like, I just felt like I was in the character, and it came out. Riddick said it, not me.
Dude, one thing that I really noticed this time watching them is that Chronicles of Riddick feels way more stylish camera-wise than the other two. And that's probably because they had the insane budget to do it all. But there's so many like Dutch angles and stuff, like when they're shooting anybody from the Necromonger cast, it's always like the camera's on a slant, or it's like below somebody with like a vast view behind them. You know, I really like to go up for bat for Chronicles of Riddick because that's the one that gets the most shame and shade tossed its way. And I'm just like, you know, idiots. Like we aren't going to get stuff like this anymore. And it's like, if you think this is bad, you know, like it's not. So shut up.
It is a huge bummer that like you can say whatever you want to about how much Chronicles of Riddick in particular works for you or doesn't, but we really like nobody's allowed to do this anymore, and it is such a massive bummer. Like this team put together from the ground up this entire original lived-in sci-fi universe, and like they're able to world build like crazy. And even when they had to go back to basics and strip everything down again to make a third one, they're still able to, especially if you watch the director's cut, continue to build that world out like crazy. And I feel like nobody gets several bites at the apple to get to do something like this anymore. And it's a huge bummer. Also, because you mentioned all the tilted camera angles, that is absolutely something else that reminded me of the first Thor movie in particular, because Kenneth Branagh was super into tilted camera angles. So like the costume design and the production design and the lighting and the tilted camera angles felt very much like the first Thor. And also, can't believe I forgot to mention, Colm Feore, who plays our primary antagonist, the Lord Marshal in Chronicles of Riddick, was also Laufey, the king frost giant, and Loki's biological dad in the first Thor movie. So there you go.
Huh.
All these connections. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to Missing Out. Another big thank you to Jay. Why don't you tell people where they can find you?
No, yeah, you can find me. You can find me on Instagram. My name's under Neuromute now. It's neuro as in neurological, but the O is a 0. And then mute, as in mute the TV.
Oh, okay. Neuromute. Awesome. Are you working on anything? Anything you want to plug?
No. I'm about to start grad school. I'm going to be teaching for the first time, so I got a lot to look forward ahead of me. Not much free time in the future, but I'm excited.
That's awesome. What about you, Lex? Yeah. Where can people find you?
I still maintain that Riddick needs his own podcast. So you can find me toiling and trying desperately to will that into existence. I'm now a firm believer in the power of manifestation, so that I can create from nothing a Riddick podcast where once there was none. But I am also on Twitter and Instagram at the Lex Michael, and I also do. Tauri, did you know this? I do another podcast.
I did.
I do it with my. You do. You know. Cool. Well, then I won't tell you about it, but I will tell our listeners. I do another podcast with my partner, Marianne Ramish, and we call it Friends with Benefits. And the premise of this show, kids, is that we go through the massive pop culture juggernaut that is the television series Friends. She is a fan. I am not. Up till now, a fan of this particular program. And we go through episode by episode, all 7,482,006 episodes of Friends from a fan perspective and from a critical perspective. It's airing on HBO Max now. That's available, so you can watch it along with us. But please come check that out, because even though I'm not having a great time watching Friends, I'm having a pretty okay time talking about it. So please come check that show out. It's called Friends with Benefits. You can find that wherever you find your podcast. Tauri J, where if I want to harass you into helping me will a Riddick podcast into existence, where do I harass you?
I am nowhere. I do not exist for Riddick. You can find me at Tauri J. That's TAURIJAY. But most importantly, you can find this podcast at Missing Outcast. That's MISSINGOUTCAST. Thank you, everyone, for joining us to talk about the Riddick trilogy, or as I like to call it, the Riddigery. Nope, I don't call it that. And thank you, JQ, for hanging out with us. This has been a fun discussion. So next week we will be continuing our All in the Kool-Aid month with Netflix's Lemony Snicket, A Series of Unfortunate Events, Season 1. So make sure to join us for that. Until then, this has been the retrospective that is introspective.
And now you have a new perspective. But no, because seriously, he would be like, this podcast is brought to you by Stamps.com. And then he'd like punch through somebody's head. And then Jordy Mola would be like, where do you get your sponsors from? A unicorn's ass? And he'd be like, ha 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 ha. and then Vin Diesel would like chop off his head and it would land in a box. Like, that's why he's a really hard time booking guests, is because after a couple, they figure out that every time somebody guests on Riddick's podcast, he chops off half of their head and puts it in a box.
Yeah, it's harsh. It's tough. This is tough. Life. Hey, it's tough. Bad decorum, some would say.
Kill the Riddick.